He says, quote, "This is crack cocaine seized a few days ago by the drug enforcement agents in the park just across the street from the White House. It could easily have been heroin or PCP. It's as innocent looking as candy, but it's turning our cities into battle zones, and it's murdering our children. Let there be no mistake, this stuff is poison. Some used to call drugs harmless recreation. Well, they're not. Drugs are a real and terribly dangerous threat to our neighborhoods, our friends, and our families." The deal was sealed. Writing on the 15th anniversary of this address, a man named Balin Linnekin, who runs the Drug Policy Alliance, summed up the net effect of this crack bomb rather well. He said, "Bush's warning scared the bejesus out of every middle-class mom in America. If you can buy crack across the street from the White House," the refrain echoed from mom to mom, "then you can buy it anywhere." And it's exactly what they intended. Of course, 2 weeks later, the Washington Post revealed that the whole story was fabricated. You see, Bush had wanted a visual prop to hammer home his big ask. And so he called up the Department of Justice and asked them to find some crack that matched the description of the crack that he talked about in his speech. The DEA said, "Sure, we can come up with that for you." And so they said, "Well, can you get it from somewhere closer to the White House? We kind of need to show that it can be bought anywhere." So 2 DEA agents found a teenage boy, a young gang member in Washington, D.C., who they had been monitoring as a way to try to get to a higher level dealer, and they said, "Hey, we want to make a buy." They said, $2,500, is that okay? 3 ounces? And dude said, "Yeah, sure." And he said, "Okay, well, you got to come to Lafayette Park. That's where we'll meet you." Kid said, "I don't know where that is." They had to give him directions to Lafayette Park, right? So that he could find it, so that they could go there and sell it there, so that they could say that they bought it in Lafayette Park. In fact, there was never any record of any drug arrests, let alone crack, in Lafayette Park around that time. The suspect was paid his money, he promptly disappeared, and never turned up again. So in order to make that address, the president bought a big bag of crack, is what it boils down to. This elaborate hoax that is perpetrated on the American people has become the perfect metaphor for the lies, deceptions, hypocrisies, and manipulations of the American war on drugs. So I'm going to jump into now the U.S. correctional economy, and we're going to smoke through the last part of this. So by 1999, the United States of America had imprisoned more black people than South Africa ever did during the apartheid regime. At that time, there was around 1.8 million people behind bars, which gave the United States a dubious distinction of locking up more people than any other country in the world. By this time, the U.S. had built the largest prison system in the world, and yet still remained, quote, "far and away the most violent, advanced industrial society on earth." Never before has a supposedly free country denied basic liberty to so many of its citizens, writes Glenn Lowry in the Boston Review. He went on to characterize our culture and its relationship to crime and punishment thusly: "Our society, the society we've made here, creates criminogenic conditions in our urban ghettos and then acts out rituals of punishment against them as a form of awful human sacrifice. This situation raises a moral problem that we cannot avoid. We cannot pretend that there are more important problems in our society, or that this circumstance is the necessary solution to more pressing problems, unless we are also prepared to say that we have turned our backs on the ideal of equality for all citizens and abandon the principles of justice. We ought to ask ourselves 2 questions. Just what manner of people are we Americans? And in light of this, what are our obligations to our fellow citizens?" In a groundbreaking article published in December of 1998, in the Atlantic Monthly, Eric Schlosser of Fast Food Nation fame coined the term prison industrial complex. He defined this as a, quote, set of bureaucratic, political, and economic interests that encourage increased spending on imprisonment regardless of the actual need for it. It's a confluence of special interests that have given prison construction in the United States a seemingly unstoppable momentum, composed of politicians both liberal and conservative who have used the fear of crime to gain votes. Impoverished rural areas where prisons have become a cornerstone of economic development, private companies that regard the roughly $35 billion spent each year on corrections not as a burden on taxpayers, but as a lucrative new market. Between 1990 and 1999, a new prison opened somewhere in rural America every 15 days. This was a replacement economy engineered after the 80s wiped out family farms and rural manufacturing. The town where I was sent to prison used to be the center for agricultural manufacturing. They used to have John Deere and Caterpillar and all those groups used to build all their tractors there, and all of them disappeared. And the prison was like one of the only things left where people could get jobs. And this is replicated everywhere around the state, everywhere around the nation. So this strategy basically delivered votes for politicians who wanted to appear tough on crime and bring jobs to their constituents. It has been called a great social experiment of wholesale incarceration. No other society in human history has ever imprisoned so many of its own citizens for the purpose of crime control, right? No other society in history. Joanna Page of the Fortune Society explains that these policies have had a multi-generational impact where the damage that has been done to the community by having so many of its young people socialized in the prison system is beyond measure or recompense. A decade after Schlosser coined prison industrial complex, the numbers had swelled to nearly 2.5 million in prisons and jails, with a staggering 5.7 million people on correctional supervision. That means probation or parole. More than 200,000 women are now imprisoned, 80% of whom are mothers. There are 95,000 juvenile offenders. The female incarceration rate has jumped 757% since 1977. The total number of people in prison has risen eightfold since Nixon promised to get tough on drugs and crime. I guess he wasn't fucking around, huh? By 2005, despite 2 million drug-related arrests per year, the Department of Justice admitted that there was little to no impact on drug use or drug trade. But it did cost us, and does cost us, more than $60 billion a year. What may be more astonishing is that 2/3 of these people locked up were nonviolent offenders, most of them for drug possession or property crimes, and that 60% of them will be reincarcerated within 3 years. By 2007, the annual value of the U.S. correctional economy was around $37 billion and employed more Americans than the combined workforces of General Motors, Ford, and Walmart, the 3 largest corporate employers in the country. The grand total of all spending on law enforcement and corrections at all levels of government comes to $200 billion a year. $200 billion. One of the most contentious issues is prison labor. The idea is that one side says it keeps them busy, teaches them skills. The fact of the matter is they're taught very few marketable skills. They don't make any money, and they can't list their experience when they go out for work, and they can't find work when they leave anyway. The real issue surrounding prison labor is the same arguments apply to slave labor, which is that it is an exploitation of the labor force for specific economic gain. It's not a new problem either. 130 years ago, the New York Times ran a headline piece called "The Competition of Prison Labor," in which they denounced, quote, "the ruinous competition of convict labor with honest industry." Noam Chomsky calls prison labor a flexible workforce.